You're listening to the Study Podcast with Dr. Paul Wegner. He's going to give us the Hebrew word of the day.
And I think I have a couple of them for you again.
Oh, good.
Sorry about that. But our first one is...
I think this is just a Hebrew podcast now.
Yeah, that's right. In Genesis 15:15, we're going to talk about afterlife today, what the Israelites thought about that.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the phrases that becomes real common is, as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. And that's kind of the phrase it sounds like when they die.
Yeah.
They go to their fathers in peace, and you will be buried at a good old age. Literally, it says, you will go to your fathers in peace, which is exactly what I translated there.
Yeah.
But it just sounds interesting. Okay, so in their minds, going to their fathers must have been something that was pleasant, that they thought it was peaceful and stuff like that. So it sounds like it's a place of comfort, and they're with the people they loved.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that was one of them. And then another one, I thought this is interesting. In Deuteronomy 32:22, it says, "For fire is kindled in my fear or my anger, and burns to the lowest part of Sheol, and it consumes the earth, and it yields, and it sets on fire the foundations of the mountains." So the idea of the lowest parts of Sheol, and so you always wondered, what does that mean? There's parts of Sheol, and some of them are worse than others, and
Sure.
I doubt that that's true.
Yeah.
But it's because I mean, it's a place of torment and all
Yeah.
that. I assume everybody's in about the same kind of torment.
Right.
But I thought that was interesting. And there's several passages now that will talk about that lower, like in Job 41:24, it says, "And his heart was as hard as a stone, even as hard as a lower millstone." And I assume what they're getting at is that the lower stone was probably the hardest, so that when they ground grain,
Yeah.
that bottom one was the one that did most of the work.
Yeah.
So, but it's very clear that it was the lower one. And then in Genesis 6:16, it says, "And you shall make a window for the ark and finish it a cubit from the top and set the door in the ark in the side of it. And you shall make it with lower, second, and third decks." So it had levels in the ark.
Yeah.
And the lower one is that same word that was called the lower one.
The
before.
lower.
Yeah.
Okay, I may have missed it. Could you tell us how to pronounce lower?
Oh, I didn't. There it is. It's tahat-tatim.
Tahat-tatim?
Yeah, because
Okay.
tahat is a common word to mean under or
Below or
after or
something?
lower.
After.
Yeah. So that must be a noun made from it that means lower, I guess.
The low kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
And then Joshua 15:19, it says, "And then she said, 'Give me a blessing. Since you have given me the land of Negev, give me also spring of water.' So he gave her the upper and lower springs." Now that would make sense. So you've got one that's higher and one that's lower. Okay.
Okay.
Fits very similar to the other.
Yeah.
And then in Judges 1:15, it's almost the same thing. She said to him, "Give me a blessing since you have given me the land of the Negev. Give me the springs of water." So so Caleb gave her the upper springs and the lower springs. So it's, again, it seems like that fits. So
It seems very physical.
yeah.
Too, like not metaphorical in a sense. It's very
Especially
much
in
like
these ones,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's like a physical direction kind of. in a
Yeah.
way,
So
or
to have it the
orientation.
lower parts of Sheol,
Yeah.
I assume it just means it'll extend all the way to,
to like all
even
of it.
the extent of it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
assume that's what it's getting at.
Yeah.
So it probably doesn't mean there's lowers or there's
Like levels or
in it.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just figured. Okay. So where do you go when you die? Let me ask you. Today, when you die, where do you go?
Well, it depends, right?
Okay.
If you know Christ or not,
Okay. And then where do you go?
heaven or hell.
Okay. And then where do you go? So heaven, I assume. Okay. And do you have a Bible verse to tell me that?
Oh man, you're kind of put me on the spot. I can't think of one off the top of my head.
How about to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord?
Oh, that's an interesting one. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then, but where did the people go in the Old Testament?
yeah.
See, in my mind, that's even a better question because
Yeah. Pre-Christ.
Yeah.
That was kind of the condition I brought up, basically, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So when somebody has died and Jesus has already paid the price for them, it makes sense they go to heaven.
Yeah.
But in the Old Testament, Jesus hadn't died yet.
Yeah.
So what happens to them?
Yeah.
We're going to answer that question today.
Well, that's good because that's a complicated question or a scary question, maybe even.
Yeah,
You know?
but we've got some pretty good evidence for this.
Okay.
Here's my chart on Israelite concept of afterlife, and basically what I did, when I started my research, I thought, I wonder what it means. So I basically tried to figure out at each time in history. So I went to about 2000 BC, and the phrases that kept coming up were going to be with their fathers or going to sleep with their fathers.
Yeah.
And I assume that means going to the same grave and, the family tomb almost. Okay. And so I'm assuming that's what it was getting at.
So really maybe not even a concept of an afterlife.
Right.
Just that like you'll be buried with.
Yeah.
Your body will go where your family
and
is.
it seemed like it was a place of peace. It always talks about peace or comfort kind of thing. Okay, so that's the first one. Then at about 1000 BC, I started finding things like Sheol talked about, and it was often under the underworld. And then I put referred to as being downward. That part was real clear. They keep saying Sheol is downward.
Yeah.
And then parallel.
Well, and that even fits in with the idea of lower, the lowest parts of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then parallel with death, that was often used. And then I put possible chambers or levels. That one I'm questionable on, but I showed you the passage, so that's what you get. All right. But what I found out is that the righteous people went there, but so did the unrighteous. Now, you expect the unrighteous people to go to Sheol.
Yeah.
But I found passages that would talk about the righteous people going there. Let me show you some of them.
Yeah.
So in Genesis 15, oh, wait, I'm sorry. These are the ones that talk about
down
the
to
peace.
fathers.
Yeah. So for you shall go to your fathers in peace, or when you lie down with your fathers, or to lie down with your fathers in Deuteronomy. So that seemed to be the concept that it was talking about. Okay, or otherwise it came about as soon as the Lord, the king sleeps with his fathers, or David slept with his fathers, David slept with his fathers. So it seems like to go to be with their fathers kind of was an earlier one. When you get to kings, it seems like it's more to go to sleep with your fathers or something like that.
I guess one interesting part of that is there is a way to say that they're dead.
Yeah.
So this is there's something separate from just
That's
the
true.
concept of death.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Although in their minds, I assume it was equal to that. Because a lot of times death was parallel to Sheol and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So anyway, those are the concepts that came. Okay. Then when we talked about Sheol, the underworld referred to as being downward, like Proverbs, the path of life leads upward towards the wise, that he may keep away from Sheol
It's
below.
kind of an opposite.
Yeah. Isaiah says, and Sheol from beneath has excited you over you and to meet you when you come. So the idea of being downward there.
Yeah.
Parallel with death. Psalm 89:48 said, "What can a man, or what man can live and not see death? Can he deliver his soul from the power of Sheol?" So you can see death and Sheol are pretty much parallel. Proverbs 5:5, her feet go down to death, her steps take hold of Sheol. Or Proverbs 7:27, her house is the way to Sheol, descending to the chambers of death. There's that chambers of death, almost like there's parts of it. But anyway, but you can see it's clearly parallel with death.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Then here's the chambers or levels. So we just went through those. So the question is that what it's getting at or not? And I think probably not. So, all right. And then now righteous. So both the righteous and wicked are Psalm 6:4 and 5 says, "Return, O Lord, rescue my soul. Save me because of thy loving kindness, for there is no mention of thee in death, and in Sheol who will give thee thanks." So he understood that when he died, he'd go to Sheol, and no one would, they're not praising him in Sheol.
Right.
Or Psalm 30, verse 3, "Lord, you have brought up my soul from Sheol. You have kept me alive that I may not go down to the pit." That sounds like God had saved this person from that. But the key is, they still thought they were going to Sheol when they died.
Right.
Yeah. And then these are some of the other ones. I just thought if you needed some other passages, those were there.
Yeah.
And that one makes sense. Here's some more of those passages. All right. Okay, now the wicked ones. For Sheol cannot thank you, death cannot praise you. Those who go down to the pit cannot hope for your faithfulness. So there it's talking about these people that are going down, and once you're there, they don't hope for God's faithfulness.
Right.
And then in Job, "Oh, that you would hide me in Sheol, that you would conceal me till your wrath returns to you, that you would set a limit for me and remember me."
That's very interesting.
Yeah, now remember, Job thinks that he's being punished by God.
Yeah.
So he thinks he's being punished and that he'll be sent to Sheol. Now he's asking.
He's actually saying almost like,
Yeah.
it'd be better for me to be
down in Sheol,
Yeah,
but
please,
then he's hoping that God will bring him back out of there
Yeah.
when it was over. But
Yeah.
that's not how it works, at least from what we can tell.
Right.
All right.
Interesting that he thought it could, though.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, the next passage is on resurrection, because this is about 600 BC. So what we've just done is we've gone, what was it about 2,000?
Yeah.
What was it about 1,000? Oh, and I should show you that picture on the,
Of the big chart.
yeah, sorry. Notice I've got the righteous and the wicked there. And so at about 1,000, that they thought when they died, they went to Sheol. Okay. Then we're going to the 600. For the first time, now Daniel is about 600 BC when it was written. So it actually has in chapter 12, many of those who sleep in the dust of the ground will awake. These to everlasting life, but others to disgrace and everlasting contempt. So it's interesting on that one, it sounds like you actually have people, individual resurrection that's coming up, and some are going to everlasting life, some will go to everlasting contempt. Now, that is really unique. Hardly ever do you see anything about individual resurrection. It's almost always about national resurrection. Like Ezekiel, remember the dry bones passage?
Oh, yeah.
Here's one of the passages, verse 11. And he said to me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. Behold, they say, our bones are dried up and our hope is perished. We are completely cut off. So the idea of national resurrection is that remember those dry bones came back to life?
Right.
So he was telling them that the nation is not over, that they're going to be brought back to life and that God's going to restore them.
Yeah.
So that's not that uncommon. Even some of the passages in Job, I think, have national resurrection, and some of those others, probably even Isaiah.
Yeah.
But I think individual resurrection is really rare. And I actually think it probably could only have happened by the time it gets developed along. And, remember, 600 is like 200 years before the last book in the Old Testament.
Sure, yeah.
Then you've got the 400 silent years, and then you go into the New Testament. So it's real close to the end of history.
Well, and I think probably historically, Israel's in a very interesting spot when Daniel's being written, right?
Sure.
The concept of the nation is probably distant in a way because everyone is dispersed, right?
Yeah.
You know?
And certainly they seem to be more interested. Remember, there's going to be a righteous remnant that come out of Babylon, but it's going to be individuals that care enough about God.
Yeah.
So, Okay, so that's about 600 BC. Okay.
Can I ask one more question?
Oh, yeah.
Because there's another interesting thing in there. So you have the individual part, and I guess this is part of what these are related, I think. But you also have the everlasting life and everlasting contempt.
Yeah.
So it seems like there's a separation happening too.
Yes.
Which of course has to do with individuals because people are going different areas. Like what else would individual mean? I guess. But But that is interesting. That seems like a development on the idea of.
Yep. And I'm going to show you that in a minute. But if you notice, that didn't seem to be the same concept at about 1,000 BC.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So this one, and notice my picture here. It's 30 AD is where Jesus is going to die.
Yeah.
That was my estimate.
Yeah.
Okay. But remember, the rich man and Lazarus is actually before that.
Oh man.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So this is going to be. So this is Luke 16, and in that passage, you've got quite a bit of helpful information that you wouldn't understand probably from the Old Testament, but by New Testament time. Now, notice this is even before Jesus dies on the cross.
Yeah.
So this would almost be right before things change for good.
Yeah.
Right? So on one side, you've got Abraham's bosom, and he's in comfort, if you remember.
Yeah.
Now that's perfect because now you know Old Testament saints like an Abraham are
have a
now
spot,
in
right.
that part. Yeah. And remember, that's where Lazarus goes too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then on the other side, you've got the rich man. He's in torment. And actually, it actually says that he's in Hades. It said the term is actually used there.
Yeah.
So then you know it. And then in between, it says there's a great chasm that no one can pass. So now you're
But they can still see each other.
They can see, yeah. So now you've got two parts of Sheol, as I understand it, a good part and part where there's comfort, part where there's punishment and pain and torment. So and you learn a lot about things. You can't get out of there. You know, he says, "Here, can I go back and tell my friends and my
Right.
brothers, and he
Can't
says
do it.
no, can't do that.
Yeah.
I can't even send Lazarus to do that.
Right.
And can he dip something on my water and put it on my tongue? He can't do that.
Yeah.
So that chasm makes it so that it's uncrossable. So whoever's in the comfort part is going to stay there. Whoever's in the torment part is going to stay there.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. That helps us a lot.
Yeah, and it still feels like a development.
Yeah.
Like more information kind of you've seen.
And I understand it that as the biblical text goes along, it gives more and more revelation to help us understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, a couple passages that I wanted to show you, like Matthew 27. This is one passage I never understood until I started working on this passage. So look what it says in Matthew 27, 50 and 51. And Jesus cried out with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. So you know it's at Jesus' death, right? Okay. And behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth shook and the rocks were split. Okay, that's interesting. What's going on? Okay, the tombs were open, and the many bodies of saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And I thought, what is going on? Okay,
That's pretty wild, yeah.
I'll tell you what I used to think this was. What I used to think is that when Jesus rose from the dead, it was so powerful, it splashed out on others, and some of them came alive. That probably doesn't make any sense, but that's what I thought. Look at the next part. And coming out of the tombs after the resurrection, they entered the holy city and appeared to many. Now, notice, we all knew, I'm going to argue there's two signs here. We all knew about the first one, the veil of the temple ripping from top to bottom. What's that mean?
Well, that's like the separation.
Okay.
Right?
And
but
why
being torn from the top is like no person could have done that.
Okay, so God's doing it.
Yeah.
And what's the open veil? Where were they going into?
Into the temple, right?
And what part of the temple even?
The Holy of Holies, right?
Yeah.
It's the very center, right?
Yeah, remember? Because they couldn't go into the Holy of Holies except once a year and the priest only.
Yeah, in the whole process.
Yeah, so what's that telling us?
Well, now you have maybe not access to God, but closeness with God.
No, I would say actually you have access to God even. So that I think that's a good term for it.
Yeah.
So that one makes perfect sense. We always understood it. I'm going to argue that the second one is in 52, where the tombs are now broken up. Now some of people are going to be more alive than ever were. So I think it's indicating the resurrection, and that people are going to come alive. And I think that's exactly what happened when Jesus died, right?
Yeah.
People that were on that other side of Sheol are now let out and get to go with
on the good, the comforting side.
yeah,
of
on the
Sheol.
good side, that were like Abraham's bosom.
Yeah.
Those people would now get to go and be with God because now the way's been paid.
Yeah.
So what I think this is two signs helping us to know. We all knew what the first one was, and that made perfect sense.
Yeah.
I think the second one makes a lot of sense now too.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay?
That's interesting.
Yeah, so that's my first thing that I found that I thought, oh, that's real helpful.
Yeah.
All right, a couple other passages like where do you go when you die? All right, so 2 Corinthians 5:8, we are of good courage, I say, and prefer rather to be absent from the body and to be at home with the Lord.
Oh, yeah, that's the one you brought up earlier.
Yeah, and then Philippians has one similar to it. But I am hard-pressed from both directions, having the desire to depart to be with Christ, for that is very much better.
Yeah.
Yet to remain in the flesh is more necessary for your sake.
Yeah.
I remember I was just reading this morning in Scripture, and I thought, oh, that one actually fits really well because it makes a lot of sense out of, here's Paul struggling to be there. You know, how many of us wouldn't want to go to be with Christ? But he's also saying, but I know I'm supposed to be here to help you guys out. So I thought that's actually a good passage.
Yeah.
All right, so those ones actually now make a lot of sense to me. Okay, and it fits right into our understanding. The next passage made. Oh wait, I'm going to jump down to the last one. Okay, so I help you know. In Revelation 20:10, it says, "And the devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and false prophet are also. And they were tormented day and night forever and ever." Verse 14 says, "Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire." Remember that part of torment was Hades?
Right.
And it's now cast into the lake of fire?
Yeah.
So now we've got the two parts. The comfort side, they go to be with Christ when Christ dies on the cross. The Hades gets cast in the lake of fire at the end times.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So now, and why does death get cast in there? Well, death is no longer necessary, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to be actually punished almost in Hades or in the lake of fire.
Yeah.
And then Hades, because it's not going to be needed anymore, is going to be cast in. So
Yeah.
my understanding is that those people in Hades are now cast in the lake of fire.
Yeah.
So they don't get out. And I'm assuming that's what they wondered, will we ever get out of here?
Yeah.
The answer is no. They go right from Hades into the lake of fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So conceptually,
Yeah.
we have Sheol. Sheol?
It's Sheol.
Sheol.
Yeah.
It's two parts, essentially.
Yeah.
The comforting part is solved Christ's death, essentially.
Yeah.
Or in his resurrection, too, I suppose, really. We
Yeah.
probably say
Almost all that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other part continues, which we call Hades,
Yeah.
or is referred to as Hades, at least, in
Yeah.
like New Testament,
Yeah.
the Gospels. And then that in the end times kind of
Yes.
gets dealt with, too.
Yeah.
So Sheol kind of is over as well, I guess, right? At that
Yeah.
point.
At that
Like,
point, it's empty,
the
I
two
suppose.
parts of it are kind of,
Yeah. Now, this actually makes another passage make sense. Do you remember Jesus on the cross saying to the thief there,
I was thinking about that,
today
actually.
you'll be with me in paradise?
Yeah.
And you always, well, what's paradise? Well,
Yeah.
I think paradise is another term for heaven. And that's telling him that today you'll be with me because up to this point you could never go there, but now you can.
Now we can go to the Holy City.
Yeah.
That's interesting because that was actually, after you asked me that was the first passage that came to my mind when you asked me earlier about, how do we know there's like heaven or whatever? But like that's an interesting one where he says like, you'll be with me in paradise. But that does make a little more
and
sense.
I think it helps us to understand what all is happening.
Yeah.
Now, there's one more that's always been a tough passage.
Okay.
And it's that one, 1 Peter 3:19. Let me read it for you, and then I'll tell you what I think it means. For Christ also died for sins once for all, the just for the unjust, in order that he might bring us to God, having been put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit. So you've got the context of Jesus dying on the cross, right? Now, look, verse 19, in which he went and made proclamation to the spirits now in prison, who were once disobedient when the patience of God kept waiting in the days of Noah, during the construction of the ark, in which a few, that is, 8 persons, were brought safely through the water. See, that has always been a tough one. What is that talking about? It?
Yeah.
My understanding is that if you think about Sheol, and if you think about, remember, they can see, remember you had said, and they can look back and forth. If these guys on the side of torment see those other side take off, remember at Jesus' death and resurrection, they can now go. So I'm sure the people on this side are saying, oh, look, they're getting
going.
to go. Maybe one of these days we'll be able to go, and we'll be able to get out of here.
Yeah.
I think what Jesus had to do is go down and make proclamations to them who are now in that prison. I'm assuming Hades and that prison are similar, and he's telling them, no, you're staying here. One of these days you will be cast in the lake of fire, but you don't get out of here.
Yeah.
And I think that's what he had to. Now, that word proclamation, it actually is the word good news. Evangelion.
Sure.
But it's never means that in 1 Peter. It always means an announcement or something like that. So I think he made an announcement to those people that were in that part of Sheol that they weren't going to get out of there, and that one of these days they'd be cast into the lake of fire.
Yeah.
That then at least makes some sense. And it tells me, so who are those people? Well, they're like the people that were in Noah's day. So it gives a little, like almost like an illustration, what those people are like. Well, they're like the ones that rebelled against God in Noah's day and then were killed in the flood.
Yeah.
So I think that's how you are to understand that first.
Yeah.
So it makes now more sense to me.
Yeah, it does. All the pieces kind of fit together.
Yeah. Okay, there's still a few more.
Okay.
All right, so this is the big picture, and we've talked about most of the things, except we've got some little things down here.
I saw that earlier. I didn't mention enigmas.
Yeah.
We have things that don't totally fit, maybe.
Exactly. So let's look at the first one. The first one is Genesis 15:6.
Okay.
It says, and then he believed the Lord, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness. My understanding is what it means to believe in the Lord is that Abraham is qualified to go to heaven, but there's no way made yet, so he can't go yet.
Okay.
So he's qualified, meaning that when Jesus dies on the cross, he'll be able to go,
Yeah.
but at this point he can't go because the way's not made.
Because Christ hasn't died yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would then make some sense to me why he says, okay, and he believed, and he was counted to him as righteousness. Okay. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Well, I think it means that he can go, but is just not ready yet.
Yeah.
So I think that helps me.
Yeah.
All right, here's my enigmas. First one is Enoch. All right. Enoch walked with God and he was not, for God took him. Remember that passage?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that one, okay. I've always thought that Enoch was such a righteous person that God wanted him with himself. So he took him.
Yeah.
And I assume that's what it's getting at. Then the second King's passage is Elijah. Remember, they're walking around, and here's what it says. And behold, there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire, which separated them, and Elijah was taken up in a whirlwind to
This
heaven.
was going to be the other thing I was going to ask you, actually.
Okay, good.
Yeah, because that was a big kind of mystery, right?
Yeah. So what happened to him? If I'm right on this understanding of Sheol, that meant that he must have gone up to the clouds, but then is brought right back down because there's no way made for him yet, right? Because Jesus hasn't made the way.
Yeah.
Now, I'm assuming God can do special things, and if he wants to take him to be with him like Enoch, I assume that's possible. But I think it'd be more likely that he would stick with his plan, and so that both Enoch is in this holding place until Jesus dies, and so would Elijah be in this holding place.
Yeah.
And that would make, in my mind, a little more sense. Now, remember Job? Do you remember in Job 9:33 it says, "And there was no umpire between us who may lay his hands upon us both"? Umpire is probably not a really good translation, but the ESV says there's no arbitrator. That's probably a little more sense. And then the NIV says, if only there was someone to mediate between us. So what Job is asking is wouldn't it be great? Because Job thinks God is being unfair, right? And he thinks he's being punished, but he hasn't done anything wrong.
Yeah.
So here's Job on this side saying, and he's already said, well, I can't fight you, God. You're so strong, I can't do that. But
If only there was a mediator.
Yeah, somebody that could do that. Now, in time, he
Yeah,
does
that
bring the mediator, right? Jesus?
Yeah.
But Job didn't even want one until he got in the situation where he needed one, and then he longed for one.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that that's what those enigmas are for. Those enigmas are to get them longing. Like, wouldn't it be neat if you could go to be with God like Enoch or Elisha?
Yeah.
And in actual fact, I know we can't, but wouldn't it be neat?
Yeah.
So they're longing for that, and then in time he gives them.
Yeah.
I think that's the same thing that happened to Job. He didn't really want it until he needed it, and then when he needed it, he longed for it, and God gave him that too. That would be Jesus.
It's kind of a foreshadowing in a way.
And also, because God doesn't usually give us stuff until we want it. And I think what he was doing, he was almost creating a desire in us,
Right.
and then fulfilled that desire.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of neat.
That is neat.
So I think those enigmas actually then make some sense.
Yeah. Certainly in the big narrative, I think.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay.
And it's interesting, all these things from the beginning still fit, right?
Yeah.
Because the idea of being with your, sleeping with your fathers, like that still fits with this expanded idea, the more detailed idea we get later on.
And see, that's why I think progressive revelation makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So God reveals little things all along the way, but nothing that he has to undo later. So everything it's like a foreshadowing or an opening up, and then a more revealing. So God just keeps revealing more and more and more.
Yeah.
But he never has to go backwards. He
Right.
He only gives as much as he needs at each point.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of neat.
It is. It's very neat.
Yeah. So that actually helped me also understand how God kind of gave revelation and only parts at certain times.
Well, and that does, I think, probably help set up even the idea of why people were expecting a Messiah. Like all these things there's more to it than that, because we see some stuff in Isaiah, of course,
Yeah. But that's
these
probably
little
also,
pieces,
that's probably also why they weren't real clear on who he was or how he is actually going to work out.
Yeah.
And so, because God hadn't revealed all of that yet, just enough to get him longing for it, and then enough to say, oh, he certainly looks like it.
Yeah.
Remember when John asked, are you the Messiah, or should I keep looking for somebody else? He says,
Right.
well, the blind are seeing, and the lame are walking, and isn't that the stuff that's supposed to happen when the Messiah comes?
Yeah.
So he gave him enough to know that, but just not enough to give him all the pieces.
Yeah. And then you get the written Matthew.
Yeah.
That makes some of these connections.
Yeah.
All these things kind of keep going as
Yeah.
we read through the New Testament,
Yeah.
and it brings even more context into it.
Another passage that some students often bring up is, do you remember when Saul calls up the witch of Endor?
Oh yeah,
And she not calls up, the witch of Endor calls up Samuel.
Yeah.
And remember, he comes up, he seems kind of ticked. He says, Saul, what are you doing? And he wants to know information. And but it sounds like he's coming up from Sheol.
Yeah.
My understanding is he's coming up from Sheol.
Right.
And that's probably what's happening with him. So, there's one more passage that I wanted to tell you about, and I forgot to do it. So it's in 2 Samuel 12:23. Do you remember that passage where his son is getting ready to die? The sin with Bathsheba,
Yeah.
and his child is going to die.
Yeah.
And what he says is, the child will not come to me, but I will go to him. I
Yeah.
don't know if you remember that, but
Yeah.
but a lot of people then think, oh, that means that children will go to heaven, and because the child's not going to come back to life, but David will go. He's a righteous person. He'll go to heaven.
Right.
I don't think that's what that means. Remember, they at that point believed that both the righteous and the wicked go to the same place.
Yeah.
So he's not saying that I'm a righteous person, I'm going to heaven. He's saying, well, we both go to Sheol, both the righteous and the wicked go there.
Yeah.
And so the child, whatever, whichever party's in, he's going to be there.
Yeah, there's kind of a tragic irony to it, is what he's saying. Is like, my child is supposed to come to me in life, but we're not going to have that.
You're right.
I'll be able to join him
in
death. There's kind of a flip.
And what this means now, because that was a pretty good verse to show that children go to heaven when they die.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any biblical passages that are real clear on where children go when they die.
Sure.
And you can argue both ways. You can argue they have a sin nature, and so they go where sin is automatically going to send them to hell, or because they're children. Remember, Jesus often talks about have the children come to me because of their innocence and stuff like that. So the question is, and that's actually where that idea of children, the age of accountability, if you'll look through Scripture and you'll never find anything like that. So the idea is, it's not in Scripture. So what happens when children die?
Yeah.
And my best answer that I've got is, I don't know, but I trust God who does know where they're going. And that's the best I got, because I don't think there's anything in Scripture that's real clear as to where they go.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you do research, sometimes you don't always come out with things you like. I didn't have an answer for that.
Yeah, and that's a complicated,
Yeah.
anyone who's been through that, or lost a child, it's such a complicated,
Yeah.
Tragic, horrible thing to experience. But you also don't want to give someone a false,
Yeah.
or maybe it may not even be false, but something that's
we don't know to be true.
contrived.
Yeah.
A contrived kind of comfort.
That's why I trust. I can say I
Yeah.
trust God who knows where that child is.
Yeah.
And I think that's very comforting. I
Yeah.
trust God with my own life,
Yeah.
even.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's go back. Here's the end, though. All right, conclusions. Where do we go? We go to heaven when we die. We've got Jesus' own words, and Jesus is the one that made that possible.
Yeah.
Okay? Today you'll be with me in paradise. I think that was a statement that said something new is happening.
Yeah.
Okay? Abraham had to wait in Sheol until Jesus made the way. And I think that's why the Luke passage actually calls it Abraham's bosom.
Oh, yeah.
It's a place where Abraham, bosom usually means closeness and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
Well, and
Lazarus will be close.
He's the father, kind of.
Yeah.
In the fathers that normally would be referred to, I think. In
Yeah,
terms of
almost like the first
sleeping
one
with them,
that made that
Yeah.
statement of faith that goes
Yeah.
there. Yeah. So I think that's helpful. The New Testament passages help confirm this,
Mm-hmm.
and we saw those. And then Enoch and Elijah were hints that God was going to do something like this, but never told him in the Old Testament. Only once we got to the New Testament, there was this idea that we get to go with him when we die.
Yeah.
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 And
And
then-
it's based on like righteousness is what it
Yeah.
seems like.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what Christ does. He, imputes that righteousness.
That's right.
So the framework really is there, even though it's not made explicit.
Yeah, in that Genesis 15 passage for Abraham, and Abraham believed God and it was
Yeah.
accounted to him as righteousness,
Right.
that then fits that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then saints rising is also a sign of this. Some students have always asked, well, did they die again? Or did they go right up to heaven? I don't actually know. My guess is that they were a sign so that people would know. Because notice it said they were saints, so they knew that those were believing people that would come back to life. And so I think it was an image to them that one of these days we might be like this too in heaven with them.
Well, it's showing what's happening.
Yeah. So I think that actually helps me understand that image too.
Yeah.
Which I didn't before.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
That was not as heavy as I thought it could have been.
Yeah.
Talking about death and everything, but it very kind of uplifting in in a way.
Especially for
It's always
us.
good to know that there's a plan.
Yeah.
You know, like,
Yeah.
and to see it and to be able to kind
Yeah.
of deal with it. And it's that's one of those things that can be hard. There's a
Yeah.
lot of changing language, and it certainly seems like a lot of changing concepts
Yeah.
of how people are talking about it as you go through
Yeah.
the biblical text.
That helped me. That's why it helped me to see
Yeah.
what times they were referring to
Yeah.
see how much they knew at that
Yeah,
point.
and I think this is a good theological practice.
Yes.
Because this is looking through
Yeah.
the whole of the Bible, everything is referring to this theme or
Yeah.
topic, and figuring out how do these pieces fit together without throwing anything away?
Yeah.
That's kind of the theological task in a way.
Yeah, and certainly the hermeneutical task, right?
Yeah.
How are we to understand these passages,
Yeah.
given the light of their context and stuff?
Yeah.
And then how do you put it all together?
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so good.
Yeah. Well, there we have it.
Thank you so much. That was a really good one. I'm
Well,
looking
thank
forward
you.
to our next one.
All right, we'll see you. Thank you.